Hey, we get it. You don't want to be hearing a Progressive commercial right now, so let us tell you something you do want to hear. No one is funnier than you. People laugh just thinking about the things you've said. I'm laughing at one of them right now. Coworkers repeat your jokes at the office, but they're never as good as when you tell them, and shame on them for trying. There. Don't you feel better? You'll also feel better knowing you could save when you bundle home and auto with Progressive. Although I'm sure you'd have a funnier way to say that. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers. Bundle discount not available in all states or situations.
Alrighty, it is 10 a.m. in the East End. It is 7 a.m. in Las Vegas, 8 a.m. in beautiful Costa Rica, one of the most gorgeous countrysides in the world, and home of Sportsbook Review. I'm Joe Duffy, and here is your Sunday Tailgate Party Live. Of course, we trace our roots going way back to the Scorephone days of 1980. We're going to give you critical information for both gamblers and fantasy football players alike. And again, as I said, I'm not going anywhere as far as my social media. YouTube and my podcasts have been great to me. I know some of you have been with me for years, have told me you've discovered me there. But specifically this, there's a little bit more time investment involved and a commitment involved for the live SBR, sportsbookreview.com, Facebook Live on Sundays. So in particular, if you want this continued, appreciate it if you would give me a like, whether you're watching it live, whether you're watching it on demand, and that includes the YouTube rebroadcast. So give us a like, and that will help us out as far as exposure, search engines, both here on Facebook and on YouTube. All right, let's get straight to the information. The Texans versus the Seahawks. The Texans, the top over team in the league, going over by an average of 11.6 points per game, which is 5.7 points per game ahead of the number 2 team. Seattle second in the league in yards per point defense, forcing 19.4. Now, yards per point, the higher the number is on defense, the better. The lower the number is on offense, the better. It's basically measures efficiency. So you don't want to use, you don't want to waste yards. So if you've got a very low yards per point, you're being very efficient with those yards. Texans second worst yards per point on defense at 12.7, only forcing 12.7. So a big mismatch here. And yes, if you do have any questions or comments, I will be happy to address them. Any legitimate questions or comments. We are watching live. I'll keep you posted on the game, the Cleveland Browns and Minnesota Vikings. Cleveland is up 6-3, a minute and 35 remaining in the first quarter. And Minnesota with the ball at the 24-yard line, although a big first down gain. They have the ball, looks like, at about their own 36. And, brings me back shades of my Scorephone days where we used to do these updates live. But, as far as the questions or comments, feel free to do so. But remember, we're probably going to cover just about every single game. So, be patient as well. The Colts and the Bengals, Indianapolis -10 against the spread margin, second worst in the league. Although they're a, somewhat not awful 3-4. That's also known as the sweat barometer. It is how much a team does or does not cover by. Very similar to the points per game margin, though in this case it is relative to the point spread. So, the mere wins and losses records when it comes to ATS can be a little bit deceptive. Now, again, as I've said many times, handicappers, we debate exactly how to use against the spread margin. In reality, I use it more for regression to the mean. So essentially, teams with great against the spread margins against teams with bad against the spread margins. Usually, the computer says, and this is backed by factual, but that's the best thing about computer systems. You can test theories and, give out picks based on fact, not on assumptions. So for the most part, there is a regression to the mean. The teams with great against the spread margins will usually be pretty good go against, and teams with bad against the spread margins pretty good go with. It's also used with totals, as we've said. Colts have gone over, in fact, 5-2, but by 5.9 points per game. That's second in the league. Now, this is pretty big. This kind of sneaks under the radar. Look, the Bengals had high hopes for the rookie wide receiver, John Ross, maybe opening things up a little bit. He's missed most of the season because of injuries. He is expected to play today. So, he could be a very key addition to their lineup. Colts, second worst team in terms of yards per play on defense at 6.4. And again, the single most important statistic when it comes to, maybe the traditional statistics in handicapping, yards per rush, yards per pass, and yards per play. And, I will give a shout out to StatFox. They're the best where they do it relative to what their opponents normally allow, kind of a power rating or a strength of schedule, that is, as far as how in each one of those important categories. The Chargers versus New England. Chargers running back Melvin Gordon will play. 394 yards rushing on 3.4 yards per rush. Remember, he had 997 last year, so he is a very good player. Looks like the Vikings back in their own territory, 23 seconds remaining in that first quarter, and the Browns still with that 6-3 lead. Now 4th and 21, so if the Browns don't fumble the ball away, they should have pretty good field position, but that is a big if. New England averages 67 plays per game, just 0.2 below the league leader in Denver. Remember, as we say, pace is the most important statistic when it comes to handicapping, both in the NBA, where I know we've been pretty streaky here in the NBA this year, but back into the winning. Hit our only play last night, hit our only wise guy play on Friday. We do have an NBA play in addition to 2 wise guy plays of the traditional games. We had a play on this, and I will tell you it was on the under based on a 26-0 stat. Incredibly, that stat actually applies in another game today at offshoreinsiders.com. Joe Duffy's picks. We do have 2 wise guy plays, a major. That's just in the NFL, plus NBA. Bears and the Saints. Now pay attention, because I know a lot of you in this. Thank you for the like again. If you want this to continue, I'll be on YouTube and the podcast and forever. But if you want us to continue this Sunday live, again, a little bit more commitment than some of the other traditional stuff, please give us a like and spread the word. Bears and the Saints, home favorites of 6 or more on a 4-game straight up and against the spread streak, just 50 and 36. So that would say fade the Saints or go with the Bears. Saints, they have been as erratic as it gets. A true box of chocolates team. 3 times they have allowed 29 points or more. 3 times they've allowed 17 or less. 3 times they've allowed 149 or more yards rushing. 3 times 86 or fewer yards rushing. And when we talk about those box of chocolate teams, look, the odds makers hate uncertainty much more than the player does. The player can pass. If you really hate uncertainty, you can pass. The odds makers cannot pass. And we sharps like uncertainty. And what we mean by that is when you have a team that's a box of chocolates, normally going with a big underdog in a situation like that is a pretty high percentage play. That might be a hint as to what our free pick is, but we got more things to say about this game. Road underdogs of 3.5 or more off of consecutive wins as an underdog, though, just 243 and 292. Now that would say to favor the Bears. Teams off of games in which they scored 2 or more defensive TDs, 46 and 58. That would say to favor to fade the Bears. Now again, these records are ATS unless we otherwise note. Only the second team of the history of our database is a team off of 2 defensive touchdowns, yet they scored 17 or less. The Bears, their offense has been terrible, combined 186 passing yards their last 2 games. Still, I think the frustration is going to be a little bit less because they know they've got a work in progress with Mitch Trubisky, and he does have an upside there. Of course, they want to see a little bit more from him on the field, and he's certainly shown that athleticism, so he's a versatile quarterback. Still, the Bears' offense does have an upside. Of course, when you've been that bad, saying they have an upside isn't going that far out on the limb now, is it? Inferior team, and Trubisky struggles, though dogs of 7 or more off of 5 or fewer completions. Here's another rare case. It's very rare when a team's had 5 or fewer completions, and when it's been an underdog of 7 or more, such teams are 7-2 against the spread. In rare circumstances, that would favor the Bears. But again, not surprising, because we know that the public's going to look at the statistics and say, we sure as hell don't want to bet on the Bears, which means there's going to be value. Inferior teams with a much worse turnover margin, 562 and 426 against the spread. That would favor the Bears. Bears are tied for the league's second best ATS margin as far as winning percentage ATS at 5-2. And finally, teams with a much worse turnover rate, 562 and 426. So, for a bunch of reasons, A lot of our regression of the mean statistics say go with the Bears, and as we said, the Saints themselves have been such a box of chocolates. As we said, a couple times they've looked like they're Super Bowl contenders, and a few times this year they've looked like they have in previous years where they're one of the worst teams in the NFL. I know of a local sports talk show host in Atlanta likes to call them the 7 and 9ers, but they've been so erratic. And when you have a huge point spread with a team that's been so unpredictable as New Orleans, you keep betting, the big underdog in situations like that, you're going to come out ahead. So my free pick is, you guessed it, the Chicago Bears plus the 9.5 at SBR odds. And speaking of SBR odds, you can get your odds right there. Let's just take away that image there for a minute. SBR odds, love it. You can also get, and that's what I love right there, you can get the scores in progress, situation in progress for all your games. College basketball's around the corner. NBA is here. And as you can see, Cleveland up 6-3 at the end of the first quarter. But look at those live odds. You might even see some of them will change in front of us. SBR odds is fantastic. And of course, you also want to use offshoreinsiders.com for the best picks. But our pick is Chicago plus the 9.5. Philadelphia at San Francisco. Philadelphia is tied for the league's second best ATS margin in terms of ATS winning percentage. It's different than the sweat barometer measurement that we've used. And again, thank you for those of you who have given us the likes. Please give us as many likes as possible. That tells us you want the live tailgate party to continue Sundays in NFL. And again, if we build it up here, we'll return to the college football tailgate party, and, the bowls will be here sooner than you know. So, please give us a vote of confidence. It will help us decide whether, or, how often to do this, etc. And that includes if you're watching this on demand, and includes if you're watching this on YouTube. Philadelphia at San Fran, as we said, an angle that says essentially go with the team with a much worse yards per point on offense, and that's with at least 5 games under their belt where the statistic truly says a team is much worse with yards per point. 188 and 137 against the spread. That would favor the San Francisco 49ers. Again, yards per point is just that. How many yards does it take you to, your total yards divided by points? The lower, the better. It says you're very efficient on offense. Well, obviously, Philadelphia's been much more efficient. But in the NFL, which is such a regression to the mean sport, go with the worst team under those circumstances. And remember, the NFL is the most popular sport from a betting stand. Sportsbooks love it, which means more squares bet NFL, higher percentage-wise, and of course in pure numbers. Therefore, going with those bad teams is a good high percentage play. And it looks like very early into the second quarter, still 6-3 Cleveland. And it looks like the Browns shockingly making a mistake there, and they're going to get a penalty. So will be a fourth down and 5. So it looks like they're going to be punting the ball away. And again, shades of my score phone days. Angle that says, we said the San Francisco has gone over 14-0 at home off of a game in which fewer than 31% of their opponents' first downs were converted on third down. So again, they've gone over in situations like this. Raiders and the Bills. By the way, we'll have your top consensus plays coming up at the bottom of this report. Some may say the top contrarian plays. Raiders and the Bills with a league best 4-1-1 against the spread winning percentage. Bills lead the league in yards per point on defense at 20.4. We explained what yards per point is, but again, they've been forcing teams to waste yards. Oakland with the fewest plays per game at 57. Again, as we said, that means, essentially they would be a slower paced team and might more likely to be involved in a lower scoring game. And one of those angles that says go with a team with a much worse turnover rate, 562 and 426. That would favor Oakland. Now, again, the theory behind that is pretty simple. Not only the regression of the mean, the term that I use quite often in these, but also that turnovers are correctable. Teams can correct those turnovers, where usually when you're talking about, yards per rush, yards per point, that's more of or yards per play, that's more of a lead indicator. The turnovers can be a lag indicator because it is a little bit correctable. And some handicappers argue there's a certain amount of good and bad fortune involved in turnovers more than there are in things such as, yards per play, yards per game, etc. So that makes sense. The teams with a much worse turnover ratio are actually a good bet. And a good example of deductive reasoning versus inductive. I've seen articles over the years. People are saying, yeah, the team that wins the turnover battle is the team that usually not only wins, but covers. So handicap turnovers. And then they actually do the opposite. They go with the team. You can't bet these games retroactively. That would be nice to know if I could know in advance which team is going to win the turnover battle and then bet it. That's not how gambling works. So that's an example of deductive reasoning. And then as a result, a lot of squares will bet the team with the better turnover ratio entering the game. Panthers and the Buccaneers. Tampa 1-4-1 against the spread mark, which is second worst in the league. And yet Tampa quarterback Jameis Winston, he was banged up. He is going to play despite a shoulder injury. It's a lot easier to say shoulder injury than sore shoulder. The Panthers linebacker Luke Kuechly, their best defensive player easily, and their defensive leader. He did clear concussion protocol. A lot of sources still say he is questionable. You would think if he passed concussion protocol and he's their best defensive player, he's going to play. But most of my trusted sources aren't willing to call him probable. Tampa, though, thin by injuries in their secondary. 3 key injuries, so look for Cam Newton. Look, as I said, I personally do not bet those fantasy football proposition things, but look, Cam Newton, he's starting to heat up. He was slowed down. Talk about sore shoulder. There you go. Talk about a guy who had a shoulder issue. Cam Newton did early in the year, and that's probably why he got off to the slow start, coming off a bad year. He seems to be coming around. Obviously, he hasn't been the mark of consistency, but against a weak secondary thin by injuries, I would probably bet any over props when it comes to total yards, because I'm sure that Carolina is going to open it up as far as even total passes. So again, if you're into betting those fantasy football type props, don't even know what it is offhand, so it's more of a lean and advisory, so to speak. But, go to sportsbookreview.com. All of those great sportsbooks listed, most thoroughly vetted sportsbooks are at sportsbookreview.com, as I like to say, kind of the consumer reports of sportsbooks. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Offshore Insider. There's no S at the end because of the limited characters. Now, Panthers offense, perhaps the most consistent in the NFL. Well, maybe New Orleans is, although New Orleans probably more so in defense. But 3 times they scored 13 or less, the Panthers have. 4 times 23 or more. Tampa has allowed 30 or more points each of their last 2 games. Tampa 0-10 against the spread at home off of consecutive road losses. And let's see, looks like penalty, it's still 11:22 remaining in the second quarter. Cleveland is up 6-3, and looks like a flag, apparently, based on the reaction of the Cleveland players. It is on Minnesota, it looks like. All right, the Redskins and the Cowboys. Redskins cornerback Josh Norman, widely accepted as one of the best in the game, pretty good trash talker, I hear, is probable after missing the Monday Night Football game. Yeah, of course, the Redskins are on a short week. Divisional home underdogs on a short week when their opponent has at least the normal rest. Pretty decent 21-16 against the spread for 56.8%. That would favor, of course, the Redskins. Now, slightly higher winning percentage when it's as traditional as possible. Sunday game, the home underdog is off of a Monday night game, and the slight road favorite, is off of a Sunday game the previous week. That would be 19-14. Washington, 14-4 as underdogs. Again, these records are against the spread, unless I specifically note. And again, I do thank you for any likes you can give us, both on Facebook, whether it's live, whether it's on the rebroadcast, and that includes the rebroadcast on YouTube for various reasons. And again, that says you want us to keep doing this live on Sundays. And make sure you check out Sportsbook Review. I know they've been doing a lot more here on the Facebook page as far as live stuff, especially if you're into tennis. I know there's I don't bet tennis, but I know we got a great tennis guy at Sportsbook Review, and the great totals guy, Charles. outstanding with that. So make sure you subscribe to Sportsbook Review Facebook page. A lot of great live stuff, and I know SBR is increasing the programming there. Falcons and the Jets. Atlanta second in the league at 6.2 yards per play. So, their offense hasn't been all that great this year, but the advanced metrics are pretty good. It says that they've really been better than maybe some of the other stats would say. Atlanta 12-0 against the spread on the road off of a road game in which they were outgained unless they are getting 4 or more points. Meanwhile, the Jets 0-12 against the spread outside the division off of the loss in which they scored first. And second down and 8, 9:36 remaining in the second quarter. So, maybe our under after that early score, the under wasn't looking so good, but we got a lot more ahead of us. And remember, this same stat that's going under 26 straight times, it actually applies on another game today among 2 wise guy plays and a major for the traditional starts, plus NBA at offshoreinsiders.com, Joe Duffy's picks. Look, we got a thoroughly in-depth preview of offshoreinsiders.com and the Steelers and the Lions for Sunday Night Football. Does look like Detroit wide receiver Golden Tate is probable. 36 catches in 6 games after 90 or more each of the last 3 seasons. Matt Stafford's been sacked 23 times, most in the NFL, and, including 19 the last 4, 17 the last 3, and the Steelers rank second in sacks with 24. So I get a feeling I know what the Steelers' basic defensive strategy is going to be tonight, to blitz and blitz often. Detroit is going over 6-0 as home underdogs. Pittsburgh is going under 6-1, including 4-0 on the road, although Detroit's going over 3-0 at home. And a very in-depth preview on the Sunday night game at offshoreinsiders.com. All right, the biggest consensus plays, Dallas, Atlanta, and Oakland. So Oakland is an underdog. It's, a little bit more rare when an underdog, although a small underdog is a consensus play. So keep that in mind. Yeah, we will join you next Sunday, and keep giving us the likes, and who knows, maybe we can return to the Saturday program. But we want to build up the live audience for now because of the time commitment, etc. So give us some likes, help spread the word. And, even if you're not watching this live, thank you. It does look like we had a pretty good audience live, and I know a lot of you will be, getting out of bed and watching this on demand. Make sure you visit Sportsbook Review for all kinds of fantastic information. Best picks in the world are at offshoreinsiders.com. My plays have been public, Joe Duffy's picks, since 1988 on the Score Phone days. So I've been doing this a long time. We got a big portfolio for today. And again, we will talk to you next week. Sportsbook Review's Facebook page, 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
Xfinity is breaking the gig barrier with Wi-Fi speeds over a gig. It's more than enough speed to power all your devices. Introducing Gig Wi-Fi, new from Xfinity. Go online, call 1-800-XFINITY, or visit a store today. Restrictions apply.